Item 8.3, presentation, discussion, possible action regarding the Greater Northgate Small Area Plan Engagement Report. Mr. Armstrong is here, and I think a number of the citizens who participated in this are in the audience, and it was circulated to all of us, so some of us have printed it off, some of us have it on our computers, and some of us have a lot of notes, but I don't know we'll get through them all tonight. But the floor is yours, sir.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. Good evening, Mayor, Council. Anthony Armstrong, Planning and Development Services. So tonight, I'm going to kind of walk you through, for those of you who were at all the meetings necessarily, and some in the community who might not know all the details. I'll walk you through the process we went for this engagement and how we got to this report, kind of give you some highlights of what we talked about each of these meetings, and feel free to ask questions as we go. And certainly at the end, I'll available for any questions as well. So we started off, this started kind of after the January 9th City Council meeting. There's a couple items on there. Michael Ostrowski and I presented kind of two different timelines for some different planning efforts. We ended up going forward with this particular planning effort, which started, Mother Nature hit us back a week, so we started on January 28th. This is the first meeting. We walked through really high level. We had about 100 attendees at that meeting, kind of ranged throughout the community. We reached out to a select group of individuals, so City of Bryan, Texas A&M, representatives from Hensel Park, Century Square, different representatives in the city, Northgate District Association. We were trying to target a lot of key stakeholders within this group or within this area, the small area plan, after we had defined it, given council direction. So this first meeting was, the highlight really of it was some information about the process, what would be going on, and then a SWOT level analysis. So what were the strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities, and kind of some tension points within the boundary of the plan. So we got a lot of feedback at tables. As you can see there, they went through some different activities with their table leaders, which was all facilitated by staff. We also then opened up the online feedback portion, so you can see that on the right-hand side. It's also in the report as well. This is a copy of all the comments and et cetera that we got through the online feedback hub site, where people would go on there, give their input throughout the process. And that was open for a large majority of the process. A couple weeks later, we started going over existing conditions. So staff presented a large amount of data, part one of the data to the committee. Of those 100 people that showed up to that first meeting, we had about 70 people join the committee. So about 70 people joined that stakeholder committee. Overall, we're on the list. That does include elected officials. So you've got about 14 of that being P&Z and council, the rest being kind of citizens in the community. We walked over kind of high level all the different master plans. So this was an exhibit showed at one of them, but kind of highlights the different overall planning efforts of all the different kind of districts, if you will, throughout the planning area. So you've got what City of Bryan's doing in Oak Terrace. Hensel Park, as some of you might know, has a master plan for their development of that park over the next few years. Century Square currently finishing out their phase 2 along the front of University. And then a little bit harder to see, but there's a big talk was connectivity and those underpasses or overpasses for pedestrians on University Drive. At this meeting and the following meeting, we asked for the committee to come up with their vision statement. So kind of what is it that the committee, what was their driving beacon, if you will, when they were coming up with action items and voting on different aspects in the plan. And so we kind of worked together, if you will. There was a couple of, they voted on this as a committee. Staff had a little bit of input in this as well. But ultimately, their guiding mission was rooted in history and tradition. The Greater Northgate area will be a thoughtfully designed and well-connected hub, bringing together the Northgate District, Century Square, Hensel Park, and North Point Crossing. Through strategic planning and collaborative development, we envision pedestrian-friendly connectivity, enhanced infrastructure, and lifestyle conveniences. This plan will foster future community while honoring its historic area for tourists and locals alike. So this was, at the end of this, we gave the committee a lot of data, anything from fiscal information, so property tax data, it's all in the report. There's a lot of stuff in there, it's in the appendices, to fire and police data, demographics, population, you name it. We gave them a lot of stuff to deal with. So this was kind of the end of it from a staff talking to the committee, and then they set this vision statement and they started going forth to talk about what it is that they wanted to see as a committee. So that first meeting with them, we talked a lot about connectivity. It was centered around connectivity as a whole, if you will. So could be bike, pedestrian, just general road connectivity throughout the different areas. Talked a lot about the grade separations on University, so a lot of pedestrian crossings. How do you connect Century Square over to Northgate proper? So we went through kind of defining these different areas of Northgate, the greater Northgate small area plan, the Northgate district, which is 150 acres or so on the left-hand side of your screen from College Avenue, and then Northgate, as in what most people would recognize as Northgate being that kind of two-block entertainment district area. And so we spent a meeting kind of talking through connectivity, things that they wanted to see. There was a trolley mentioned. It's in the report. You can look at it. A lot of interesting ideas in there. We followed that up with the conversation on land use. So was there anything that the committee did or did not like seeing as far as it came with the use of land, so residential, commercial, et cetera. Not a ton came out of that discussion necessarily as a need for changes, but a lot of interesting conversations around retail uses and how to get certain retail uses. Certainly a big need or desire for a grocery store of some nature in that area to help kind of catalyze that and really facilitate some growth and into that walkable environment ultimate goal. We then did a walking tour, speaking of walkable environments. So committee members went out there with staff, and they landed on 2 different routes. A couple of council members I think were able to make it out there as well. But they walked through these 2 different areas, if you will. So one that's more the university corridor and the commercial areas, and then one that kind of highlighted more core Northgate, the entertainment block area, and then kind of showing into some high-rise development as well as the parking garage. So they went through this. At the end of that, this is some pictures from the tour, a couple of standouts behind me here that were mentioned there. At the end of it, they kind of got together, talked through what are some things that they liked or didn't like what they saw. There's also a collection in the report of some different pictures and images. So they had taken different, they could walk around. We had an app. They could take a picture, say, hey, I like this, I don't like this, this is good, this is bad, etc. And so they got to walk around, give some feedback, and then we kind of talked about that at the following meeting after this one. At that meeting as well, this is very busy, but just bear with me. We had them kind of do their own little charrette exercise for really Northgate, that area. And so you can see each of these in the report, and it'll talk about them a little bit, and it kind of influenced a lot of the action items. But they basically were looking at that core area and what were some things they wanted to see. So there was things like there could be a potential for height limitations. Maybe there was particular aesthetic requirements. So there was a lot of talk about keeping brick and wood, for instance, versus steel and metal exteriors, things like that, trying to preserve a certain type of aesthetic or look in that area. General connectivity certainly was talked about, and there's kind of some safety aspects with things like the pedestrian wall, activating the promenade space, and different things like that. So from all of that engagement, we wrapped all that into about, and this is a handful, I'm not going to go through them. This is a handful of about 55 or 56 action items that we gave to the committee. So this went out to the original 70, so all the 70 individuals got a link to participate in the survey. The way the survey worked, they went through, they answered yes, no, or no opinion on if they wanted that particular action item. Again, all these action items are kind of broken out by the titles at the top of the screen, so transportation, mobility, land use and development. It's broken out that same way in the report that you guys have. With each of the action items and a little bit more of a description on what that item really means, this is kind of a real quick grab, so they were able to use the report that they had with some additional information on what that would mean. They went through, voted on all these items, and 55 of them made the final report, which is in front of you. From that, this is a chart towards the end before you get to a lot of the appendices. And again, I'm not going to read it, but I'm going to stop here to rest at it. This kind of walks through at a high level what are the different things we heard throughout the whole process as staff. And so, again, this is a brief summary. There's a lot of information in that report. So certainly I think our recommendation for you right now would be to take in that report. If you have direction, by all means, give us any direction you'd like to give. But if you want to take that in and digest it, I know we've recently hired our Northgate district manager, as you guys all know, and so we're starting conversations with that group. As we went through the process, the group kind of dwindled down. I would say we probably had 20 to 30 in those last couple of meetings. The real troopers are behind me that stuck through this meeting too, to wait till the end and not leave me up here alone talking about this. I think we've started that conversation with them, so maybe there's some opportunity there to lean on them for some direction out of this as well, and certainly make sure that it can keep moving forward. Again, I want to go through the SAPI stuff. I'll thank all the people involved. It was a tremendous effort. I'm the face of this for all intents and purposes, but I did very little work compared to my staff and a lot of these individuals behind me that put in a lot of time and effort into this engagement opportunity. And they showed up. We spent 2 hours, 3 hours at meetings talking with these folks. They spent a lot of time with us, did a lot of homework. Very appreciative of their involvement, and certainly to my staff and PubCom who created the document in front of you. It was a very fun process for us. It was a little different than our normal, I would say, but it was a good time. We really enjoyed it, and looking forward to other efforts like this in the future. And short and sweet, again, the report's in front of you for you to read and digest and direct us as you'd like. And I'm happy to answer any questions or comments, etc.
The presentation, I assume, is available to us certainly, but available to others. That slide you have with all of the pie charts is not in the report itself, but very interesting and useful as a way to summarize a whole lot of stuff. And I'd like to make sure that that's available to you send it out to everybody. So I guess all the ones that on the committee have seen it, but I had not seen that before, and it looks like a really interesting thing to study for a few minutes.
Yeah, I can certainly send the link to council. So we sent this link to the committee just to get, after the reporting had been finished, we sent it out to that same committee. The link is still active to my knowledge, so you can access this.
Oh, I see. So you're still taking input.
This is just reporting. So the input is done.
Okay.
You can't input still, but this is a link to the reporting of what was given. So you can't take the survey anymore, but anyone can still access the link to view this. And again, essentially, it was a very democratic process. If you had over 50% yeses, you made the cut. So again, about all of them minus, I think, 5 made the cut.
Well, it's certainly a heroic effort on the part of everybody who's involved, and very, very, very informative and detailed. I have just one or two questions, and I'll get to those after others have spoken. But the path forward here, what you're looking for, clarifying questions from us. You looking for direction?
I think at this point,
next steps, or what are we looking for here?
Yeah, I would say this is us giving the report to council, and any next steps that you guys would like us to take are kind of, we're willing to do that.
Well, we'll consider all of that then, and I'm going to start with the left end of my podium here, or dais, with Mr. Schaefer, and ask him to ask any questions, make any comments that he wishes to, and we'll come right down the dais.
Thanks, Mayor. I think mostly I've got comments, Anthony, and maybe a couple questions, but basically I see what you've got here for us is very useful as we think about how to move forward, which is the idea, right? But a couple of thank yous first, a compliment and a thank you to you and your staff, as you've already done that, but I think it's really important. I participated in a number of these meetings and the walkthrough at Northgate, et cetera. I wanted to be a part of it, to hear what people were saying and to see how it was going. And I think you're right. I think it was a very intensive effort. It was a very good effort. I appreciate the leadership that you and your staff gave to it along the way. I thought you did a really nice job of managing the meetings that were held along the way. It takes a lot of skill and knowledge to do those kinds of things, and you all did a nice job of it. So I appreciate that. I also want to thank Bob for taking us down this path. You know, he was the council member here who kind of had us sit back and think about what we really wanted to do, what we were doing at Northgate. A number of people that are here representing the businesses in Northgate also contacted us as members, I know, and said, hey, we need to put the brakes on this and think about it a little more carefully. And I think this is a good result that we've got because of it. I hope you all do too. So thank you to all of you who participated and spent your time and energy doing this. It's an important process. A few things that stand out to me on it, just so you know where I stand, I guess. People know that I ride a bicycle, and so the bike pedestrian part of this, the transit part of this is really important to me. And I think it is to others. It came out really as an important piece to people who participated in the answers that were given. It seemed obvious that better connectivity there with pedestrians in particular, so that pedestrians would feel more interested in the entire space, you know, and potentially even connecting across to Century Square. That might be a bit of a stretch for most pedestrians, but possibly, depending on the experience that people are having between Core and Century Square, it might be possible in the future. And the barriers that exist in terms of major roads and things like that. So I really felt like that is a key issue that we're going to be needing to look at. And I know we put in for a grant for a study for that area, which I hope we can get, and which will help us really drill down into some of those details and let us know more about it. I think in my experience, you know, we all come from our own places in life and our own knowledge and background and education and everything else. Mine really points toward the importance of public spaces and what public spaces can do for private spaces that are adjacent to them. And what I've come to believe through this process is that there are a couple of key public spaces in this area that we really ought to focus on. One of them is the piece of ground that's the surface lot that the city owns right now. And I know there's a lot of different opinions maybe on how that should go, but I'm really going to be interested in thinking about how we deal with that space in a way that makes all the other places around it come up in terms of the attraction of that space and the way it's used. So I also think you all know, some of you here know, I think my fellow council members know that I'm very interested in what happens at Hensel Park. And Hensel Park has been a forgotten and unused or misused resource for a long time. And I think this is an opportunity to make Hensel Park, with the coordination between College Station, Bryan, Texas A&M, all of us, make it a space that even though it's kind of on the edge of Northgate, it can really be a piece that once again raises everything else around it and provides a really interesting experience for people into the distant future. So I'm hopeful about that. The last thing I think that we're going to really have to pay attention to is the history of Northgate. And we've seen this change tremendously in my lifetime here. And I think I've related this story before, and I'm sorry just to go on and on, but this is important stuff. I was on the Planning and Zoning Commission in the early 2000s here, and somebody said something about high-rises at Northgate, and I kind of laughed. Yeah, right, high-rises at Northgate. I mean, this is, you know, we've got high-rises all over Northgate, and it's fine, it's good in many ways, but in other ways, it's just becoming the dominant feature, and we've got to think about what we typically think of. I think it's fair to say what most of us think of as Northgate is that core area. It is the businesses that are across the front and immediately behind, and that does represent a certain character, as has been very clearly pointed out in the plan. And I think we're going to have to figure out some way to preserve it. I mean, conservation's one thing, preservation's another. And if we're going to have what most of us in this room think of as Northgate in 20 years, there's going to have to be something done to preserve it. And I'm not sure quite what that looks like, given economic forces, but that's where I think we are. Beyond that, I would just say thank you. I think there's a lot of great stuff here. I'm still working on digesting it. I agree with the mayor. It'd be nice to see that link that you had that had everybody's answers to some of those items. I hadn't seen that before, so I'd like to be able to use this as we move forward. Thanks.
Mr. Yancey.
Thank you, Mayor. To my esteemed colleague, thank you for the kind words. I appreciate it very, very much. But it was all of us, and you know, I'm going to forever refer to this as the Armstrong engagement model. Like any good leader, you included your team, and interfaced with them on a regular basis too, but you were the face of it. You did take control of it, and it's just been a model for public engagement, and I thank you for that. I think we learned that, Northgate means a lot to Aggies far beyond what we thought, and that includes me. Early on, I was very interested in pursuing the project that we were looking at down there, but what we learned was that the history, the fun, the tradition, the character of the area is something that the city wants to preserve and enhance, and not just the city, but Aggies all over the country and ostensibly the world. And I think we ought to do that. Specifically, your plan calls for various studies and objectives. I would say follow through. You don't strike me as the kind of guy that, is going to rest on your laurels. You did all this work, you and your team, and you accomplished this, and I think it's wonderful. But, damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead, kind of a thing. I did go on the walking tour. I was struck by the neglect. I'm not laying that at staff. That's at councils, but you could tell a lot of that stuff was from years and years and years ago. I just don't think we were paying attention to this area the way we should have, and it's my hope going forward, and I'll be trying to persuade my colleagues that we allocate some money in the budget, that we tie some strings to outside agency funding, such as the Arts Council, so that we can get some bronze sculpture down there, like the really cool one that we have, that capture that spirit and that history, and where we have tangible evidence as we walk through Northgate of how much we do care about it, just as we have that tangible evidence when we go to Veterans Memorial. So I hope we'll put some resources towards this and get some sculpture down there that capture the Aggie spirit. And then for my pointed questions, the elephant in the room, I think throughout your process, if there was one, was kind of the city surface lot. That was the precipitating event that got us where we did for the small area plan. I think it would be good to signal plainly and clearly to the market that if the city of College Station and councils will in the future were to sell that, what new restrictions born of this process would it be subjected to? Is that a 4-story building? Is that a 5-story building? That kind of a thing. I didn't hear that. I think you'd want to signal that to the market. You'd want to signal that to the residents, and certainly to the merchants and the people who have given their lives and careers to Northgate, and that we clarify that. And then I had one last technical question on how many student towers do we have in this area conceptualized in planning, or that we're about to cut the ribbon on, gut shot estimate, and are we classifying those as multifamily, and should we come up with a separate classification for them because they are not multifamily?
Good question. So we've got 20 in the whole area, so just in the 150 acres of Northgate, 26. There's 23 that are currently, I would say, in a active construction phase, or built or in active construction would be 23, and you've got a couple in the review stage coming in. 2 about to break ground off of Stasny. You've got 1 coming in on the Culpeper track, 1 building on the Culpeper track. You've got 2 right across from the surface lot on Boyette. You've got the one that just did a top-out party not too long ago.
Aspire.
Yes, Aspire 2. So there's a, and that's everything. So and depends on what you call high-rise. I would say is that number is, back in the day, what we considered a high-rise was probably over 3 stories. So you've got some that are probably in that's about your 7-story mark. So a mid-rise, really, by definition, is that total number, and maybe 8 of those are that mid-rise level. The rest would all be high-rises in that 20-story range. We did actually have on the books, I can't remember the exact definition, but there was a definition for occupancy in Northgate that basically allowed you to go, it was related to the family definition, allowed you to go beyond that, so you could build a 6.6, a 5.5, et cetera, in Northgate, and it was, I think, high-density residential or something like that was the name of the use. We don't have anything currently that talks about separating a tower versus a true multifamily. It would just be classified as multifamily.
Well, would you say that these student towers, from an urban planning perspective, are the most significant development or one of the most significant developments in the growth and future of College Station's landscape? And if so, shouldn't we come up with a designation for them?
Yeah, I would say without a doubt. I mean, it's got a number of factors, right? There's a big property tax increase that comes with them, so a large revenue source for the city comes out of these towers. In the top 5, you go to the end of your budget book, 2 of, you have Fujifilm. I think all the rest of those are multifamily complexes after that, including towers and Northgate. So it's a big asset for the city as well in that regards.
And we have 25 of them coming beyond what's already there.
Including what's already there,
Including what's already
Yeah,
there.
that was my total number, there's probably,
How many new?
6 coming.
6. Great. Thank you very much, and a great job. And continue if you'd like, but Mayor,
Yeah.
thank you.
I would say if y'all want us to, we can certainly look at trying to designate that. It gets a little, you can designate things based off of height, so it'd have to look at the zoning piece of that and how is that, where does that apply? We can certainly look at something like that. That's an option for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, my terminology has always been rent by the bedroom versus market rate multifamily. But I don't think that really gets at your point. I think it's an interesting point that we ought to think a little bit more, but all of those towers are rent by the bedroom.
Right. And we can't regulate based on that, right? We can regulate based on the structure. So if it was if you wanted to say over a certain amount of stories had to be in zone X, for instance, that's an allowance.
And that's the beauty of rent by the bedroom. We've freed that up in multifamily. In general, you could have 7 bedrooms if you wanted to inside of those zones where it was permitted. And we didn't try to control occupancy in them. If they want to do parity bedroom bath, that's great. If they have some other structure, give them flexibility inside the building. But those are generally almost 99% rent by the bedroom models. And what that means is if somebody moves out, the management has the option to move somebody in unless the group decides they already got a friend they want to move in. They go to them first. But the multifamily is you rent the whole apartment, you sign up for the utilities, and you do all of that stuff. Anyway, that's another story for another time.
I think the question for council would be if you want to designate them like more for just so that it's clear what is going there, or if it's to like limit or guide certain things. If we were to change it from multifamily, I mean, Anthony kind of made the point. The regulation side of it doesn't change, but I think that would be a question if council says we either want them designated just so that it's clear that it's like a different, or if it's like we want to regulate them in some way different than we would a low or mid-rise. That would be something for you all to kind of give us direction on.
I want to get to land use in a minute, but I think, it needs more discussion because I think it's the market that dictates. The rent by the bedroom generates a higher return, it seems to me, than the market rate apartments, and that's because they appeal to people that are engaged in student occupation. Market rate apartments are all over the city, and we finally got some in College Station about 15 years ago, and now we got quite a few more, but those are targeted to people that are not looking just to rent a bedroom. They want to rent a whole thing for themselves or their young family or starter home or something. So I think it deserves a little more discussion, and we'll probably give it tonight. May I turn to Ms. McElhaney? Are you done?
Yes, sir.
Ms. McElhaney, I think we're moving in this direction. I've lost track.
I'll go ahead then.
You go right ahead.
Everyone knows that I was a big fan of this process from the get-go, and I'm still blown away by what you and all you guys were able to accomplish in honestly, 6 months is a very short amount of time to do something. This was 82 pages worth of report. What was, somebody ask a question?
No, you're on. Nobody stopped you.
So one of the things that I'm sure has been in the forefront of all of our minds over the last week or so has been public safety. And there are a few things, I know that there are a lot of things that need to be digested in this wonderful small area plan before we can make hard recommendations. And obviously we'll be turning to you guys to do that as well. I would like to see us move on a few things real quickly. And the, what was it called? The pedestrian barriers. Can you flip over to your like little pie charts? The way.
Oh, this?
Yeah, they extend the pedestrian barrier wall, that's what you're calling it, on University. From what I understand, there's a significant safety risk to people just literally stepping out onto the street. I would like to see, is that something we have to go through TxDOT for, or can we do that like
Yes,
tomorrow?
so there's, I would say, and with a number of these items, actually, you'll probably, as you read them, there's some that are kind of already in the works, so to speak. So a good example would be like, there's an item in here to talk about formalizing the Northgate group and setting up a kind of a working group with that kind of the city and them. With the Northgate district manager position, that's kind of already happening. That ball's already rolling. Similarly, we talked a little bit there. There's already a study going on for the pedestrian wall and for that expansion. So we've been looking for that and opportunities to extend that wall. I think that's part of the grant that Councilmember Schaefer was mentioning as well, to extend that.
Okay. Obviously, we hopefully can do the below grade crossings and things of that nature in the future, but anything we can do to impact safety now would be my strong preference. It sounds like there's a pretty unified position that we should restrict height, at least on the university section and immediately behind, I guess, our surface lot. Do we have feedback from the property owners on that, or is this business owners? Is that a pretty unified thought from all involved, or?
So it did make the plan as an action item to investigate that. I would say that's probably something to more discussion. Essentially, all of these drawings, they talked about some level of height restriction. There was one group and a couple of groups in particular that had a pretty good conversation about, for instance, like the corner lot that everyone knows sold, and it sold for a high value. And so what does that look like for that individual if we came in on the back end and imposed a height restriction? So they recognize that. I would say primarily it would be a mix of people who gave that feedback between owners of businesses and owners of the land. It would certainly be something if we went that forward with that action item, like any of them, it would kind of be its own ordinance piece that we would come forward. We would go through a process normally for an ordinance, reach out to individual stakeholders involved, and then bring that forward for a meeting. But in general, from what we heard in the committee, it was certainly yes, you're correct. It was a thought about limiting height. 2 to 5 stories was kind of thrown around as a number. A lot of it was more, and they can certainly come up and speak if you have questions for them as well. I think a lot of it was more of the visualization piece. So being able to maintain a particular type of visual. If I was looking out towards A&M from X location, I had an unobstructed view was kind of the sentiment if I was to summarize it.
Okay, but is it something that you think is a realistic course of action to pursue, considering that we will be limiting the height and therefore the value of the land that these businesses currently sit on? I'm not trying to advocate for it. Is this even a realistic path to go down?
Yeah, I would say we've vetted to some degree all of these for are they realistic, and realistic and feasible might be two different words. They can all be done. It's just what is that level of difficulty to make them be done, I think. I mean, we heard from a number of, again, you've got a large number of businesses that are already at a lower height limit already. I think you're probably talking about the majority of that area is probably for that. You're going to have a couple that, maybe want to have some conversations about what does that do to their property versus the other properties that don't have that restriction, and what does that look like.
Well, the fact that they're still holding the property means that they value it more than the dollar. So I'm very curious to see how that works out. But obviously, in order to preserve, as Dr. Schaefer is saying, we do need to look at what that means from an ordinance perspective and how we can do that, again, in a binary way that allows us to put boundaries around it in a way that makes sense. Can you go back to that other slide? And that was the land use and scale and the historic character. Were there any solid recommendations as to what the group might be interested in seeing on the surface lot?
Oh,
I'm tired.
Yeah, no, it was. I don't know if there was one. There was definitely a lot. I think there was some people. There was a lot of thought about open space. There was certainly a desire to have some component of open space in all of the different conversations we had in that area. I think there was probably 50-50 split in, do people want something that's not just an open space on there or not. I think there is a pretty healthy appetite to some level of development that's worked out with that group conversation. So similar to what we talked about in the beginning of all this, maybe having some effort where we talk with surrounding areas on what do they want to see develop on that property. There's certainly, I think, some interest in that. I think the number one concern I heard out of the development of the surface lot was parking. Parking was a very large concern in general in the area, but losing those parking spaces had a big impact, specifically for the businesses around there. But I think there wasn't a we all want this. There was no silver bullet as there ever is. It would definitely be something I think we'd have to iterate through a process on what does that look like.
Okay. I'm curious to see if you folks have been sitting here all night, have anything that you feel like Anthony's missed that was a big piece of is that a fair question, Mayor? I mean, just if there's anything big that they feel.
The group did not sign up to speak. I think they felt like the report was speaking for them, but
Okay.
if anybody has the urge to speak, and after Anthony's done, that's fine. I think, as I understood the process and the outcome, and from what I've heard, is that the consensus of the people that participated in this planning activity are quite pleased with the process and the report. Is that correct?
They're
I hope so.
smiling.
Well, okay, that's what I heard.
I would point out on that subject, it's a good segue. So everything you see in that report, while we wrote the words down, that isn't staff's words. There was no input from staff into any of those items. So every single one of those items was what we heard, and then we were the messenger essentially of that to you. So I might not be doing the greatest job summarizing it vocally right now, but anything in that report, I promise you, wasn't from the staff
Trust me,
standpoint.
the folks out there, well, you'll hear from them if they want to add something. They know where you live and how to reach you. We'll go to Mr. White. Are you done? Mr. White.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Anthony, I don't think we can thank you enough and thank the citizens for all they did. This is an incredible report, and one that I personally will make sure it doesn't just sit on the shelf and collect dust, and we have to move forward with it. So I just want to echo what my colleagues have said. Mobility, connectivity, safety, I think is all really important. But let me just highlight a couple of things that jumped out at me as I read this thing. First of all, I love the new title. So it's no longer Northgate. I guess we have Northgate, but I love Greater Northgate. I think that really encompasses exactly what we're trying to do. I think it encompasses what Dr. Schaefer said, Hensel Park. It brings all of that together, and that's what I think is really important to this plan. A couple of things that jumped out at me at this slide that's currently up. I love the historical character. I think we have to preserve that, and I think that's something that we can do fairly soon. I think we can. I love how your report had some pictures of some signage and stuff that we can do. I think those things are something that we can really focus on. What I really liked is under your land use and scale, where you say we need to do something that serves more than just the residents, more than just the students. I think that really gives us a great vision of that. This is a student area, but it's also something that we want other populations to come to as well. But I will tell you, the most exciting point of this whole slide is under the retail and experience section where it says participants want day to night vibrancy. To me, that just describes exactly what I think this area is. We want vibrancy in the evening. We want that bar feel, you know, whatever we do with our surface lot, but we also want some nice retail during the day where people continue to go there throughout the entire day. So I think that is something that I've really picked up on and stuff. What's the next step? What is the next step with this committee that has worked so hard for the last, I mean, we don't want to just put this on the shelf. What is your plans for the next step in keeping the citizens engaged in this?
Yeah, so this particular effort basically is,
It's
this will be
complete.
wrapping up, this is complete. Like I said, there's some stuff that'll be moving forward kind of in the works already with the Northgate area, the Northgate district manager position, things like that. I think the next step is really at the council's direction. So you've got the report in front of you, the action items. What are the things, what would you like us to go and do out of that? Is it all of them? Is it some of them? You know, sit on it, think about which ones you want. I think that's where we're at now. So this is kind of, again, that engagement. This is all the feedback from the citizens, and now we're looking, you know, you guys as a group can kind of direct staff on what you would like us to do with that.
Well, I think the timing is perfect. Here we're talking budgets, we're talking allocating money. This is the time to do it. This is the time that we can start putting some of these in action. And I will be going through this report again and making some recommendations for next week so we can actually continue to move on. Very good job. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Mr. Wright?
Great job, Anthony, and everyone involved. This was exciting. I know, I think I was on the losing end of that vote for the high rise, but I'm fine. We're moving on. Because the point of all of that was we were going to have this with the developer at the table too. Well, the developer's not at the table, but we have this. And that was the most important part of it, was that we got folks together, which was something that I brought up when I got elected, of getting people together in Northgate to actually have some momentum moving forward with it. And I think we have that, and I think you took 6 months, and you've given us a lot to work through. But the highlights of that, I think, is the idea, I like this Greater Northgate because we need to, like I keep saying, this is highlighting where Northgate is, quote unquote. What we're talking about, what we want to preserve, is really those storefronts that face Houston University, preserving that. And so maybe we do meddle into like the market and say, hey, we're going to put height restrictions on it and things like that. Those are tough choices that we're going to have to make that are going to impact the sellability of those things down the line, whether right or wrong. That if we want to preserve the character, I think that's what you're going to have to do. And I'm all for that. I think that it's because we have taken the time to have this thing to say, hey, look, this is actually what we're even talking about, period. I love the idea, as you pointed out, with day-to-night vibrancy. I think I just see it slightly differently. I think you have that already. I think that what you're missing is the connectivity between Century Square and Northgate. I'm not certain that you can shove a mini Century Square into Northgate when you already have a Century Square that has those things. And I might be preaching to the choir. You're just nodding along. I appreciate that. So, but I think that's great. It's great that we address that, because I think connectivity and transportation from one university to the other is going to be really important. And to mark that area off, saying this is our entertainment area. There's just two parts of it. Maybe it's you put some bricks in the ground. You make it like little mini stockyards or something like that, right? We have all the information now, and we can piece through it. We have public input. We can say, okay, these are the things that are important to us. And I'm with Melissa. I think there's things that we can start now. I think you can have a 1-year, 5-year, 10-year plan on these things. Most importantly, going back to what I said at the beginning, and I'll wrap up, is that you had 70 folks. Let's just say there was 70 folks that participated in this whole thing. And I hope moving forward that you have 70 advocates and 70 ambassadors, so that when we start doing things again in Northgate and we start making recommendations that not everyone will like, because clearly you have folks going, every which way on some of these really important things. So we're going to make decisions that it's not going to sit well with everybody. I hope now we have 70 folks that are going to be out there and being ambassadors or advocates for this decision and maybe stomping on rumors that will just pop up that really have no merit to what we're trying to do. There's not one person up here that is going to try to shut down the chicken. And we never were. But those were pervasive rumors. And I hope that through this process, we understand that we want what's best for this area. We're not trying to shut down businesses or anything like that. And I hope that the folks that are very involved kind of take that and run with it also. And they know that our intentions, at least, we're trying our best to make that area something special. So I thank everyone that was involved, and I thank you, and I think this is great, and I think that we're going to take it and run with it, maybe as soon as next week.
Mr. Smith, it has come to you.
Great. I love being last.
Oh, you're not last. I'm last.
Okay. Oh, that's right.
But I'll be brief.
I'm the last pro tem. Anyway, no, I also attended several of the meetings, and they were all good. And it was a good process to watch. One of the things that I most enjoyed about watching the process was the representation from the business owners, from the property owners. There was a lot of input and participation, and they also got to be the beneficiary of a lot of great information that you presented to the group. There's a huge amount of information about the emergency response heat maps, the things that tell you what we're facing in Northgate and why we need to look at this and the problems that need to be solved. Those are things that everyone that attended those meetings got to benefit from seeing. And I also heard about the daytime and nighttime Northgate at those meetings. Those came out of some of those discussions, and it's like, yeah, that's true. It exists now, and I think it's something to enhance. It's something to make the most of. And I see the role of the city in this. When you look at that map and see how much of this is public space and how much of it, the city really only has a little bit of the land that goes into this. So the city gets the opportunity to make sure the infrastructure is there to support what does happen, to make sure that the public spaces are performing the need that the businesses and the community need them to perform. So, that's our part, but the bulk of the work that needs to be done there needs to be done by the property owners, the business owners that are there. And historically, this may be the fourth or fifth Northgate revitalization thing that I've been part of. Historically, they come together for the meeting, but then go off and do their thing, and the city's out there working until someone starts throwing rocks at them and telling them they're doing it all wrong. The business owners and the property owners need to stay involved. They need to be leading this process. The city can't preserve Northgate, but the business property owners can preserve Northgate. The city can facilitate that. The city can help make it happen. But if the property owners aren't all on board, if they aren't the cheerleaders, the advocates for this movement, it won't happen. So the one thing that I hope that sticks from this whole process is the involvement and activity of the property owners, the business owners in the Northgate area, so that this thing can be a success and that the city will stand up and be an open and cooperative partner with those businesses, and that can make it be a success.
Thank you. Two or three sort of interesting little side notes, if you'll answer one or two questions, and then a couple of points I'll make. On page 10 of the report, key topic highlights, it seemed like there was a word choice debate. I'm sure that's true in any kind of report, but there seemed to be some concern about the use of the words infill or underutilized commercial and private property. It said that they prefer to either remove the language or clarify. Could you just clarify what's going on there, and I don't know that it was in the report anywhere highlighted that it ever showed up again, but I gather in the dialogue, people talked about infill properties or properties that maybe weren't generating the tax revenue that the city would like to see, and I'm sure that might be a little pejorative, so.
Sure. I think there was a couple of instances, this would be one of them, was, yeah, the term from the technical planning realm means one thing to us. It was a very scary term to the business owners and property owners there. I think there was some concern on who is making that is someone making the determination that this is underutilized, and are we going to force something on those private properties? And certainly that's not the case, right? We're talking about was something neglected, left alone, parking lots, for instance, not ours, but parking lots in general, right? There's a lot of surface parking. So we had some conversation around that, and we just opted to change the language to something that was still meeting the intent, but was a little more commonly understood is what it meant.
I think that was a useful point, and frankly, a useful outcome perhaps. A discussion among people from different walks of life, how they use words and how they think about it. So we need to think about it ourselves. I'm puzzled a little bit on the walkability and safety theme you got up there. Mm-hmm. And there's really no separate, quote, chapter. You call them chapters, but there's not one for that. It's kind of, the walkability's kind of rolled into connectivity and transit and everything else. I don't see anything in here about public safety from the point of view of personal protection, the policing and the fire, EMT, emergency response, and whether that needs to be thought differently about. And I didn't see anything much come out of this. When they got talking about safety, it tends to be about pedestrian car interactions and pedestrian safety and bicycle safety and all of that. But the public safety that policing does, which we spend a lot of money on over there, is a very important topic, but it didn't seem to come out in this report. Is that because it's kind of satisfactory, or they just assume that's going to get done anyway, and we'll adapt our policing plan to however the land use gets laid out?
Yeah, so we did talk a lot about that in the existing conditions. So the first two meetings where we walked through kind of some data, we gave them a lot of information, and they had a lot of questions. There was a lot of questions from the committee on where, how, what that data meant. But throughout the rest of the conversations, there was never anything brought up by the committee about public safety and increase or decrease, anything like that. It just never was a topic that they wanted
to. It's just assumed that the operations, the city will adapt operations to continue to make it a personally safe place, not just from a pedestrian walkability point of view. I did notice one comment in here in response to somebody's earlier question about the parking lot. I think you raised it. On page 15, the only place I could find it, explore repurposing the city-owned surface parking lot to accommodate a variety of uses. Potential uses include a community gathering area, flexible event space, a pocket park, public parking, or, and this goes back to Mr. Yancey's point, a low-profile mixed-use development that complements the scale and character of adjacent buildings. So there is a kind of a hint of it in there, but not a whole lot of discussion because that still begs the question, where's the parking going to go? If you build a low-rise or high-rise, you still got to deal with parking issues. So I think that's an interesting comment in there. It's the only place I could find where the Northgate parking lot is actually addressed. But it does fall in that area of land use, and Ms. McElhaney raised my point exactly. Ooh, that's the scale and land use on properties that are not developed into high rises, and the city comes in and lays an overlay on that and says, well, you can't go more than 4 or 5 stories. Is that a taking if we retroactively do that sort of thing? I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure it's downzoning necessarily, but it certainly has market implications. And I'm not sure that the property owners, and I'm not sure how many property owners, some of the people that are represented in the 70 were property owners as well as business owners. But I think there's some property owners that probably would think seriously about pushing back on the city trying to do that. Not that it isn't an interesting and important scale idea from historic use, character, scale, all of that. I think that makes a lot of sense, but I think you asked the question, is this legal?
Well, this,
Or
the
did you say
citizens,
you asked it regarding parking, but frankly, I think that is a difficult question.
well, the citizens own the surface lot, if we're talking about right there in the middle of
Citizens own that.
Northgate
but
proper.
There's a lot of private property owners that own some of those lower scale buildings
Yes, sir.
that they've got to be involved in that dialogue too.
Yeah.
Anyway, that, just a thought that I had on that. I wonder, there's nothing much in here, let me just throw a general statement. You talked about private sector, a lot of emphasis on privately owned land, private sector decisions, responding to market forces and all of that. The public sector, we own land there too, but we got a responsibility both for regulating and providing kind of the structure that they're asking for, particularly on the land use and some of these other protective covenants and so forth that might be done to protect historic character and so forth. So we got a regulatory focus, but we're also being asked to invest city funds in a lot of these ideas, whether it's sidewalks or streets or parking garages or whatever it might be. And I think it's really neat that we now have a district manager who's going to be engaged in kind of an ongoing dialogue, not just in Northgate, but Northgate will occupy a fair amount of her time, I would hope, and working with the if there is a Northgate Association rejuvenation, working with those folks about sorting out who's going to do what and where the responsibilities and roles lie between the public sector investment, public sector attractiveness, and private sector. I would point out, we've got an economic development department, and they are always looking to bring interesting businesses and locating them in interesting places. They are working on a comprehensive plan. I would hope some unique emphasis on Northgate and what could be done with city resources already, bringing businesses to the table and saying, here's a really neat area that we're going to put some public money into, but there's a lot of private money going in here, even more, a lot more private money than public money going in here. Mm-hmm. You need to be in this place. So I think somewhere in our economic development planning activity, we should actually incorporate some of those ideas. There was no discussion really about PIDs or TERS in here financing this public engagement or private engagement. There are MMDs, for example, in various sub-areas of Houston that have taxed themselves to develop things. Public infrastructure development, PID, I think, follows some of that. Mm-hmm. It may have a different kind of deal, but it really requires then the businesses and the business owners to put up some money of their own to match what the taxpayers of the city are going to be putting into it. I mean, that's something we got to struggle with. I understand they didn't have time to cover all of those things, but it's a question that we're going to have to deal with.
We did talk about them in the kind of at the beginning where we talked about some financing and kind of what is the revenue the city's seeing over there, what kind of dollars, what kind of expenditures. We mentioned that. We didn't dive into that because I think ultimately that becomes a question of the items that we move forward with. How, I think if council directs us, how do we fund those becomes the next question or part of that next question, and that could be certainly has been mentioned before. I think PIDS is a pretty interesting one that we could look at over there.
Yeah, well, that brings us back to a good point, and Mr. White introduced it, that we got budgeting we're in the middle of. Frankly, I don't know that we've got a plan to know where I would put a lot of money, but I did hear you respond to several other questions that some of these things are already underway. For example, TxDOT's been working on that wall idea about extending it for 2 years, it seems to me. I don't have a clue where they're at on it. There is a lot of dialogue about major grade-separated crossings at University, trying to find the money and getting that together. I think the city's very committed to that, and not that we're going to use any of this year's budget to do it, because there's not a plan in place that we can say we could spend $10 million or $30 million on that. But I think, to answer a little bit of your question, what's next, I think somewhere out of this, you come back to us with, here's 4 things that are already underway that are addressing some of those points there. The grant we request for the mobility study or whatever it is, seemed to me, if we're going to put any money into street improvements or changing anything over there, we need to have somebody to put together the holistic plan on that. So we keep our fingers crossed, and maybe we'll get that. If not, we'll figure out how to fund it ourselves. So anyway, I'm really upbeat on a lot of the stuff that's in here. I think there's some really great ideas. That transit and connectivity, walkability, safety, all of those that's really important. Retail and experience, I think that's where economic development can lend a shoulder to that, and where the city's already working on some of that. We just need to clarify how that fits into the Northgate, greater Northgate opportunities. Some of the historic character, public realm, and identity, that may be, we need to look for grants. We need to look for other ways of getting some of that done. Or if you had an MMD there, or a local association that fostered private investment in public improvements, I think a public improvement district might be something that we could encourage, and they could address some of those character and public realm and identity issues as well as the city could. Anyway, that's just some of my random thoughts. And
Mayor,
again, I thought it was a really good presentation. Yes, sir.
Representative Dyson has offered his services to try and help us with some legislation, potentially funding. He just wanted us to work with him, approach him, and so.
I think we'll work with anybody that, I don't know as I could characterize how that would come out. I would turn to my legislative affairs group and
I would say
the
just,
city manager.
yeah, for the council's information, I mean, even though it was pre all of this, I mean, we've obviously got some federal funding that's been in the pipeline for that. And when we met with all of our 2 representatives and our senator, this was funding for the potential crossing was something we talked to them about. Obviously, that was pre this session. And we've also discussed it with A&M, who gave us a letter of support for the same thing. So that is something, we certainly have a role in funding anything over there, and especially something like this, but it would be helpful given the scale to have state and federal dollars.
Yeah, and certainly the grade separation on University Drive is a place where he could easily play a significant role, there's no doubt about it. And Senator Schwertner as well. Anyway, I guess my only closing thought, one is I think there's a lot of great ideas in here. I just mentioned a few that I was looking for that I didn't quite see fleshed out, but hey, that's up to the rest of us to bring something to the table too. I thank you and thank all of the working folks out there that make a living in that neighborhood and or enjoy the neighborhood over there in Northgate, to thank them for being involved. If you can come back to us maybe with a shorter list that says, okay, here's some things we're already working on. And probably you talked about a lot of that when they were asking you questions. Say, oh yeah, we've got this underway, and the city manager just mentioned one.
It would be helpful just to have a comprehensive list of things that are in the pipeline already over there, to give us
And
a
the
starting
status,
point.
and the status.
And the status, yes.
That and
We could build on that.
and I still think having a city staff member now as a special districts coordinator working with this group of coalesced interests is a really positive thing, and I hope that they can organize and energize themselves to bring us additional ideas and be, as Mr. Wright says, advocates for moving agenda items forward that they have put forward here. Okay, 10:30. Any further questions or comments, points?
from the public.
Did you want to make a comment? Yeah, Courtney, you're the spokesperson for a lot of things there, please.
No, I want to start by saying how thankful and appreciative we are to council for pushing this forward, for staff, all your work you did. It was amazing. The experience was incredible. The communication was incredible. We had a wonderful mix of people from the community, all facets, A&M, he mentioned, Century Square, us. There were conversations had that have never been had before. and we really appreciate it. One of the main things of this plan and this process was that it was a broad scope. It was the greater Northgate area. We talked about our Northgate, one meeting specifically, and then we had the walkthrough, but the general idea of this planning process was that it was the whole entire area. So a lot of these concerns and questions that you guys have, they weren't really addressed because we didn't dive into just our area. So if I can be a little bit greedy and you want to have another planning process, I would love to have something that focuses on our entertainment district, that really dives into what we could be as a tourist attraction and a designation for the city. I think there's more learning we could do. There's things that we could bring in that we don't even know about yet. So I'm just throwing it out there that maybe we can dive a little deeper into Northgate proper. Core. The property that the city owns is the core of that area. It's important that we look at it further and we decide as a city and a community what we want this space to be now and in the future. And so, again, I just ask that maybe we take some more time and do more.
Yeah,
and then-
you mentioned that your association, remind me again, that's reorganized Northgate.
Yes.
Business
and
owners?
Business and land owners, yes. And simultaneously during this process, we as an organization have done our own workshops and we've done stuff, and we look forward to presenting that to council in the future as well. But one thing, Mr. Smith, I'd like to address to you. You touched two things that I want to say. One, there's a lot of city property in Northgate that has been neglected and needs to be fixed. It's not just our buildings. The city property itself, things that the city owns, are deteriorating. They're broken. They're safety hazards. Like Bob said, we have been neglected. Now, to touch on fixing up our properties, because I agree with you, we are responsible for our properties and our buildings. We kind of touched on it a little bit in one of the meetings. I would like to look into options of codes and ordinances that allow us to fix our buildings in the fashion that they are already. Like if something were to happen to the chicken as it's written, I would not be able to go back and put wood all over it. I want to be able to do that. I want to be able to fix it so that it's contained or preserves what it is. You touched on Northgate.
I think your last point is included in that report. I remember reading somewhere in there that's
Yeah.
the regulatory environment over remodeling and things
Yes,
needs to be
yeah.
thought about
Let's
and
look-
made more
yes.
flexible.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
And the
that's all.
neglect
That's
of
really-
the street landscaping and some of that is also cited in here.
Yeah.
I agree with you on that, and frankly, I think the ongoing weekly, even daily cleaning, sweeping, street sides, curbsides, parking lots, I mean,
Yep.
a lot of that is
I mean,
something that is public property.
y'all
It
have one
needs to be done.
guy out there cleaning the promenade now, and he's great, and I am out there with him multiple times, or multiple mornings, because he gets out there really early, but he's one guy with a hose, so it's only so much he can do. Yeah, is there any other questions for me?
Well,
or
I'm reminded
about the
those.
committee?
I'm reminded of those German villages, out where every shopkeeper's out there hosing down,
Yeah,
sweeping in front of
yeah.
their
Well,
shop.
we do that. I have actually personally swept the promenade
Yeah.
before. Our property ends at the end of our steps, and then
Yeah,
it is city
yeah.
property.
Well,
but
then that
we
promenade
do try to
the
keep.
promenade is the city's property. You're right.
Yeah. Okay. Thank
Okay.
y'all again.
Thank you. We do have a regular agenda, gentlemen and ladies. Shall we move on to that? Are you ready? Okay, great presentation. Thank you all for being here. We really enjoyed learning from you guys, what can be done and what should be done, and we'll work on that. We'll move on to the regular agenda.